And the evidence that our hierarchies of competence work is everywhere, because everything around us works all the time. Ayaan Hirsi Ali tells two interesting stories in her book Infidel, which is a great book, by the way. She came from Africa and from a country that wasn't very functional. And when she came to Holland, she said there were two things that really amazed her. And this really struck me because, now and then you get lucky and you can see the world you live in from an outsider's perspective, right? You get to see through someone else's eyes. She said the first thing that knocked her off her feet was waiting for a bus in Amsterdam. And she's standing at the bus stop and there's a pole there and there's a digital sign on the pole. And the digital sign says when the next bus is going to come and counts down. And then when it hits 0, the bus appears. And she absolutely could not believe that would happen, that there could be a sign that told you when the bus would come and that it would change and the bus would actually appear. And you think, well, yeah, no, that's a miracle, man. That's an absolute miracle. It is. You've got to think that through. The amount of timing and organization and reliability, mechanical reliability and sociological or social organization and dedication on the part of the bus drivers and the entire company and the organization of the whole city and the state to make that possible is absolutely beyond belief, especially when it's timed to, well, perhaps not the second, but to 10 seconds or something like that. That is absolutely beyond belief. And her inability to comprehend that was the correct response. And then the other thing she was amazed by was that you could go talk to policemen and they would help you. That was just a no-go for her, because for her experience was policemen were there to shake you down and hurt you. And so you think, well, I won't dwell on that point any longer. The point is that it's absolutely ridiculous, blind, to make the assumption that the hierarchies in functioning Western democracies are fundamentally predicated on power and tyranny. And then, I can use a biological example too, which would place me outside of the postmodern realm of argument, because the postmodernists don't believe in biology, but they act like they do because they all die. So this primatologist named, well, I'll tell you two stories, okay, because these are really useful. So the one's about rats, and I got this story from Jaak Panksepp, who's a great neuroscientist. He wrote a book called Affective Neuroscience, which, by the way, is on my reading list. That's on my website. It's a really good book, Affective Neuroscience. He's a great scientist. He was one of the people who he learned that rats laugh. They laugh ultrasonically like bats. So if you tickle them with a pencil eraser, they laugh, but you have to record it and then slow it down, and then you can hear them. And you might think, well, rats laugh, like, what, are you going to get a grant for that? What kind of idiocy is that? It's like, no, just don't get ahead of yourself here. He was showing that capacity for social interaction, that was mediated by physiological touch, activated the same, activated the same circuits in rats that it does in people, and that those are actual biological circuits, and that we share them even with rats. Now, rats are quite similar to human beings, as it turns out. I could say especially postmodernists, but I won't. and so the fact that little rats giggle when you tickle them is actually extraordinarily important. He also identified surprising, I've been talking too much lately. He also identified the primary play circuit in mammals. And that's a big deal too from a scientific perspective. That's like discovering a new continent, like discovering a whole brain system that people really didn't know existed. That's a big deal. So here's a little story about rats. So young rats like to engage in rough and tumble play, especially juvenile males. It's also the case for puppies, if you've ever had a puppy. Dogs are like that. They like to wrestle. And it's one of the things that male human beings tend to do with their offspring, and it's a really, really good thing. Like rough and tumble play with children really helps socialize them, because it helps them figure out the difference between touch and even rough touch and pain. You know, because one of the things you're doing when you're rough and tumble playing with a little kid is, you know, you throw them up in the air and you wrestle them around. I had 2 couches when my kids were little that were sort of face to face. So we built this little wrestling ring, and I used to go in there and pound them half to death every night, you know. So they love that. I mean, they get so excited about that. They love that so much. It's just crazy. But the reason for that is, like, you're stretching out their bodies, and you're showing them that they can't put their thumb in your eye, and you're teaching them to be graceful, and you're teaching them the difference between something new that's happening to the body and something painful. You're really teaching them to dance. And it's this really complicated physiological dance that is indicative of a socialized being. And that's partly why women like men who can dance, by the way, because it shows that you can pay attention to someone else. First of all, that you're coordinated, but even more importantly, that you can take the fact of your coordination and coordinate that with someone else's coordination. So, and that's very primal and physiological. It's built right into your body. And rough and tumble play helps with that a lot. Anyways, rats also like to rough and tumble play for much the same reasons, and sort of pretty much all social mammals. So you can tell that rats like it. See, how do you know if a rat likes something? Well, he'll work for it. And one of the ways you can figure out if a rat wants to work for something is that, you know, you get him in a state where maybe he's desperate for whatever he's working for, and you can put a little spring on him and figure out how hard he pulls to go somewhere he knows where he's going to get that. And then you can measure the force that he's willing to apply, and that gives you a rough estimate of his motivation. Or maybe he has to bar press like a, you know, like a cocaine addicted rat to receive the reward, and you can count rate of bar pressing, and you can get an estimate of how excited the rat is to go do whatever it is the rat's going to do. And so Panksepp used to put rats, he'd pair them, one rat against the other, in kind of a play arena, not a very big thing. And these were juvenile males, and they would work to do that. Okay, so they liked it. And then maybe one rat was 10% bigger than the other. And then when you paired them, the big rat would beat the little rat because 10% weight advantage was enough to make the bigger rat dominant. Okay, so then they established basically dominance and submission. You might think about that as a power relationship. And to some degree it is, but it's more complicated than that. And this is very important. So the rats play together once, and the big rat pins the little rat, really very much like wrestling. Like rats wrestle, just like people wrestle. And if you pair them together, then the big rat can pin the little rat. Okay, so now you got dominant rat, subordinate rat, roughly speaking. But then, you see, if you stop the experiment there, you'd think, well, the rats play to establish dominance and submission. But the thing is that rats don't just play once, they play many, many, many times. And that's also the case with human beings, is that you don't just play once, you play many, many times. And there's a difference between the rules of a game and the rules of a set of games. And that's so unbelievably important, so you keep that in mind, because we'll return to that. So anyways, the next time the two rats get together, the little rat has to ask the big rat to play, because the rule basically is subordinate entity asks dominant entity to play. And so the little rat does what mammals do to play. You know, they kind of put their paws down and put the rear end bit up in the air. You see dogs do that, and unless you're completely clueless, you know that that doesn't mean he's going for your throat. It means he wants you to whack him on the side of the head so he can sort of pretend to bite you, you know. It's pretty obvious if you've played with dogs and children. So, and I make that comparison because dogs and children understand each other, right? They're pack animals. They follow the same basic rules. They know how to play. They can become friends. Otherwise, you wouldn't have them as pets. I mean the dogs, not the children. So anyways, the little rat asks the big rat to play. And the big rat thinks, yeah, okay, we'll play. They wrestle. And you pair them multiple times. Well, if you pair them multiple times, what you find is that unless the big rat lets the little rat win 30% of the time, the little rat won't ask the big rat to play anymore. And that you think, well, who cares? Why is that important? It's like, it's really important. That's a really important discovery, because it shows you that even rats have a sense of fair play that emerges across iterated games. It's evidence for the biological instantiation of a social morality. It's a big deal, man. That's a big discovery. And it shows you that even at the level of rats, they're very social animals, by the way. The interactions between rats are mediated by something like a sense of fairness or justice. And so that's extremely cool, because you know, we tend to think of animals as having dominance hierarchies, and that's predicated on power, and that idea, even though the bloody postmodernists don't believe in biology, they extend that analogy up to human beings. It's just not true.